to get back on track is almost over, as pre-season testing gets underway tomorrow, but there's one vital ingredient that testing can't happen without: the tyres. These 3 testing days will be the team's and our first look at this new 2025 finalised compound range, which has changed on last year's in the construction and in the range itself. So let's jump in and take a look. To note for this year in terms of the compound range is that the C6 has been added at the softest end, and Pirelli are expecting that this will be used at street tracks like Monaco or other tracks with lower energy exertion on the tyres, because it degrades pretty quickly even over just one lap. But on the tracks that it should suit, Pirelli are hoping it'll help the teams extract more performance over quali laps and potentially bring more strategic options to them on race day. This C6 compound hasn't just come out of nowhere, and it's been in development for at least the last year, and it was first tested by all of the teams during that extended FP2 in Mexico, and the results on its performance were mixed. It was run again at the Abu Dhabi post-season tests, and things looked a lot more positive there. Over both of these tests, this compound was shown to degrade quite quickly over even just a single flying lap, and given that the Bahrain International Circuit is pretty tough on tyres anyway, even with the cooler conditions we're expecting for this test, it likely won't run too well there. This might be the reason why only 2 teams have chosen to add it to their selection of 35 sets for the test: Ferrari and Williams. The teams are allowed to select 35 sets of tyres, 30 of which can then be run on track over these 3 days, and they can distribute this over the compounds however they want. Theoretically, they could select 35 C1 tyres, but this wouldn't make for a very interesting test. The full compound range Pirelli are offering ranges from that C6 new softest compound to the C1 hardest compound, and each tyre will be able to be distinguished by what you can see on the sidewall. The even numbers will have a bracket around them like we would normally see on a Grand Prix weekend, and the odd numbers will be without this bracket. We'll also see the use of the typical red, white and yellow, plus the green and blue for the inters or wets. Although the names of these compounds are the same as last year, the makeup or the construction of them has changed to suit the increased aerodynamic load that Pirelli are expecting these cars will produce. Pirelli say that the C1 is quite similar to last year's, but the C2 has become a little bit closer to the most versatile C3. As I said, the C3 is the most versatile in terms of balance and in terms of degradation, and so the construction is pretty much the same as what we've seen for the past 2 years. This is partly because it's been successful so far, but also because Pirelli have worked on the softer end of the range. The C4 and the C5 have both been modified to reduce the possibility of graining on their treads, and Pirelli are hoping that this will make them more viable for using for race stints. Another important factor is who will be running which tyres over the event, so let's take a look at the team selections. As a reminder, the teams can only use one car over this 3-day test, so all 35 sets for the selection and 30 that actually get used will be used on just one car. In making up their 35 sets each, the teams have gone for a majority of the C3 compound, because this is the most commonly run compound over the season, and was last year too, as it sits right in the middle of the compound range. On the harder side, there's a bit more variation in the emphasis the teams have placed on the C1 and the C2. Mercedes, for example, have gone for just 2 of the C1 compound, whereas Williams have gone for 16 over the C1 and the C2. Speaking of Williams, and they're one of just 2 teams who've selected at least one set from each compound, the other being Ferrari. Aston Martin and Haas must be tuning into a different weather forecast than all the other teams, as they've gone for some intermediates and some wets in their range. Aston Martin are one of the only teams alongside Alpine to only go for the hard sets in their selection, and while this does make sense given the Bahrain track and how it treats the tyres, it does mean that when the lights go on and the temperatures come down, that their quali simulations could be a little bit slower than everyone else's. The variation in these selections and what the teams actually end up using over the 3 days is something to keep an eye on, and as usual we'll be covering it all on our social channels at Motorsport by Apex and on our website motorsportbyapex.com, all of which are linked in the description. If you enjoyed this rundown, don't forget to give the video a like and leave us a comment below with what you're most excited to look out for over these 3 days of testing, and as always, subscribe to Apex for more of the same.